Good afternoon, everybody. Joshua Keene here, also known as the red-bearded risk guy, and I just wanted to share 5 quick tips on how to control your X mod or your experience mod or ER mod or whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of names for it, but it's like a report card or a grade that multiplies your workers' comp premiums and can have a big impact on your costs. So this is just a quick overview of 5 ways that you can keep that down. There's obviously more ways, and I will go more in depth on each of these methods on future posts, but let's jump into these 5 tips. All right, so tip number 1 is to participate in a claims reimbursement program or non-disabling claims reimbursement program. So anytime you have a claim where there's no what they call a time loss, meaning it's just a small maybe ER visit, they cut themselves, didn't even need stitches, and they're back to work the next day or at the end of the day even, didn't even really miss work. In those cases, you'll still have to report the injury to your work comp carrier. Let's use SAIF as an example because it's the most common one in Oregon. But if you're participating in the non-disabling reimbursement claims program, you'll get a bill either quarterly or annually to pay back the smaller claims, and that will minimize or remove the impact that those would have on your X mod or experience mod rating. And again, that can have a big impact on your premium costs. So that's tip number 1. And I will share more on that. I'll go more in depth on how that works. And I'll even share for some of you that are in Oregon that are part of certain associations like AGC or ABC, there can be additional perks and strategies that you can use to keep this down. So I'll talk about that on future posts, but let's go ahead and move on to tip number 2. Tip number 2 has to do with how well you manage your claims. So what that really comes down to is having a well-documented policy or procedure for workers' comp claims that will allow you to make sure they're reported quickly. They have to be, a Form 801 has to be submitted within 5 days of an injury at work in Oregon. So a policy and procedure that everybody is up to speed on at the workplace will help make sure that that's happening. And then from there, how are you managing the claim? Do you have a system to help make sure that you're getting people back to work? Do you have a solid after incident investigation policy or procedure? Do you have people designated with those responsibilities? So when something happens, who do people call? Who comes in and investigates to see what happened? Who documents everything? And all of this is part of just managing claims. Like the first tip, I will be going more in depth on some of these on future posts, but let's go ahead and get into tip number 3. All right, so our third strategy for keeping work comp costs down is having a solid return to work program in place. So these are policies and procedures for, well, it's pretty self-explanatory, getting workers back to work as quick as possible. That's not just the best thing for your company, it's the best thing for your employee and really for our community. It's not good to have people sitting on the couch at home. I mean, if they're actually hurt and need to be healing, that's where they need to be. But in a lot of cases, it'd be ideal to get them back to work. It's just challenging because you know they're going to be less productive if they're hurt and can't do their normal job duties. So part of a return to work program will involve having modified job descriptions or job duties and things like that. It'll involve having relationships with clinics that are geared towards workers' comp claims that can help you decide what that employee can and can't do until they are fully recovered. And these are just a few pieces of this. Again, I can go way in depth on return to work programs. If you don't have a solid return to work program or it's not formalized, we've got some great resources on that. So go ahead and reach out to me on that. But for now, let's go ahead and get into tip number 4. This particular tip has more to do with Oregon employers or applies to Oregon employers, although other states may have similar programs, so it's worth looking into for your state if you're not in Oregon. But it's called the Employer at Injury Program, and it ties into the Return to Work program strategy. And what it means is if you participate in this program, if you create a modified job for an employee that would have been out of work for say 90 days. So let's say they get hurt, they go to a work comp clinic and they say, hey, it's going to take 90 days for them to be 100% to where they can resume their normal job duties. But you create a modified job description so that they can come back, say, in, just for sake of example, 20 days, and it saves that 70 days of them being at home, sitting on the couch, not productive, possibly getting depressed, and maybe even never coming back to work for you, because that does tend to happen, and all of that costs you more money. So even though it might not be as productive for them to be doing a light duty job or less duty job, sitting in the office when they would normally be in the field, or whatever it is that you have them doing, the state will incentivize you by reimbursing you for part of their wages. And so it makes it less of a blow to have them doing possibly less productive work, which is a win for you. It keeps the cost of your claim down, which is a win for you and your work comp carrier. And it is just better for that employee, better for their mental health, better for a lot of things. There's a lot of data on how bad it is to be sitting at home not working. And so that's tip number 4. Let's go ahead and move into tip number 5. Last but not least, tip number 5, super important, all ties into the preventative side of things, which is having a solid safety program. Do you have a written safety policy and program that actually is relevant to your day-to-day job duties or your staff's job duties? And then to reinforce that, do you have regular safety trainings, toolbox talks, whatever you want to call them? And then when there is an incident, whether it's a near miss or an actual injury, is it part of your culture or safety attitude that rather than being embarrassed or afraid to say something, people come right to you, they say, hey, this happened or this almost happened, and then from there you do a formal investigation, you document it, and then for the next few weeks from there you can schedule trainings that are relevant to that incident. So if you had a couple near misses on ladders, or you actually had an injury on ladders, or even back-to-back ladder incidents, just using that as an example, you would do maybe even multiple ladder safety trainings over the next couple of weeks, and then you would be documenting all of this, because part of your work comp rating is actually subjective. And I'll get more into that in another post, but how are you perceived by the work comp carrier? Do you actually have a good safety culture and good attitude towards prevention and keeping injuries from happening? And so again, safety is super important. I'm posting about it all the time, but I'll continue to do so. I'll go more in depth on this section in the future, but like some of these other programs and policies, if you don't have a formal safety program, or if you feel like it needs to be reviewed, that's something we're happy to help with, or you should reach out to your current agent and they might be able to help you with that. But that is tip number 5. All right, so there you have it, folks. 5 tips. I'll have more in the future. These aren't the only strategies or methods for being proactive in controlling your XMod or controlling your premiums, which is the direct costs attached to these things, but there's also an indirect cost, which I'll want to talk about more in future posts, just because your premiums are a big deal and they can make a big impact on your bottom line, and we want to control that. But controlling all of these things also again keeps your company more productive. It helps with company culture and impacts you in a lot of ways that affect your profitability beyond just the work comp premium. So we'll be talking more about that in the future, and I hope you all learned a lot. Be sure to share with your friends, like and subscribe, follow, check out my podcast, the Red Bearded Risk Guy podcast, and if you have any risk management or commercial insurance questions, don't hesitate to reach out.